to maintain validity in insurance. So that's we all know that is a requirement, and we should not neglect that portion for it either. Okay, so this is for the FSCO report, which is an Ontario-based report, but I would pretty much assume that it spans Canada-wide, and the same findings and the same statistics will be applicable to other provinces as well. Our next topic, or small subsection, is MFDA trends. So I want to just kind of perform the same exercise in terms of MFDA trends, what their enforcement department has issued for the 2018 report. First, let's just have a quick look at how the enforcement department is structured. The enforcement department has four main functions, which is intake, case assessment, investigation, and then litigation. On the intake level, the information about the potential MFDA violation is received. That can happen either through external sources, which is most often the case. So the reports are filed on the Member Event Tracking System, called METS. Those reports are made when members receive a complaint or identify issues through their review and supervisory activity, because members have an obligation to always report those issues, which is, as we will see later on in the numbers, it's quite a high numbers of reports. On the next level, the case assessment level, so once information is received, a case is opened immediately. So as soon as the information is there is no second guessing or no question, should we record this or should we not? As soon as there is a record there, a case is opened within the MFDA department. So there is a recording of that incident. On that level, information is obtained and an assessment is made to determine if a violation may have occurred. So they're looking into the details and they're assessing what the different factors look like. In case of a violation, the decision is either an administrative resolution, so that's one outcome of the assessment, or the case may be escalated to the investigation group, which is the next level. So in terms of administration resolution, what that means, that typically consists of either a warning letter or a cautionary letter. Warning letters are usually issued for compliance and violation issues where the MFDA would have and could have escalated to a formal disciplinary hearing, but they chose not to. So they usually look at each case individually and assess the factors, look at your history, and then they do have, even though they find that it might require a formal disciplinary hearing, they chose not to, just to give you that benefit of, not necessarily benefit of doubt, but just kind of give you an option to improve, and might see this as a one-off. Cautionary letters, on the other hand, are issued when the violation is minor and not that big of an issue, and it serves more as an educational purpose, just kind of to give you a first notice, hey, you might be touching something that you may not, and you might want to take a step back and correct that again before it goes any further. On the investigation level, if a case is escalated, then they start a detailed examination, which includes recommendation reports, proceeds, they conduct interviews and everything. And then from there on, it goes to the stage of litigation, where the MFDA has the authority to commence a disciplinary proceeding. Big word. Okay, so on the hearing panel level, the hearing panel is responsible for determining whether any misconduct occurred, and if so, whether any penalties should be imposed. A notice of hearing is issued, and you then, as an agent, you then have either the option to request for a settlement, and if that is agreed, and that is the end of it. Or if the MFDA does not agree with your request for a settlement, it might go further to a regular hearing, which then can, like you see in the structure here, settlement hearing or a regular hearing, and usually always in the end, the MFDA has the obligation to issue a formal report to summarize everything, and that is also publicly accessible, as you probably know as well. All right, let's go on to the next slide. Some numbers and statistics. This one just shows a little bit of an overview of activity. for the last 3 years, 16, 17, and 18. It shows how many cases were opened and ultimately how many cases were closed and what the in-between steps were in terms of warning letters, cautionary letters, and proceedings commenced. So one interesting thing to point out here is that if you look at the numbers for cases opened and cases opened, they're more or less steady. So there's more or less a straight movement. While on the other hand, if you go all the way down to the proceedings commenced, you will notice that the number has increased there. So this is a clear sign that the MFDA is getting more strict with their approach to non-compliance and with their approach to issues that they come across, and they are addressing them heavier than they used to in the past. So there is kind of a correction path that they are looking at. On the next slide, this is a summary of the top 5 primary allegations at the stage where the case was opened. So when an allegation comes in, it might mention a few different issues that may be there, and this one just kind of takes the main issue and puts it into numbers. So if I might recall your memory of with regards to what can lead to claims, those 4 points. If you look at this here and you look through the actual misdemeanors, pre-signed forms, commissions and fees that were not disclosed, suitability or something that is not suitable to your client, and then unauthorized and discretionary trading are amongst the top 5. And the pie chart here shows us that the top 5 issues, if you may, are taking 50% of the overall issues. So they're really very predominant. The all other issues was a long list of about 15 additional other issues. But this is what we see most often. And also one thing to consider is that pre-signed forms are more like a gateway drug, if you may, right? You start with that small little step. From there on, you have the authority to do discretionary trading on behalf of your client. The client may not be aware of commissions and fees that are applied to that, or your decisions in the absence of your client's knowledge may not be suitable as to what the client might be looking at. So this is really something to keep in mind to just avoid these upfront. It saves a lot of issues. We do see lots of these cases as well, and they really stand out.
Excuse me?
Yes?
What does business standards mean?
Just your due diligence and your duty of care that you need to follow and that you need to document. So the standards that you need to show that you have followed in your professional service. So that's what this is addressing. And I don't know if I can give you a concrete example, but it's just about deviating from that standard process that is required of you to perform.
But you're not aware of what that actually means in speech?
I am sure it is mentioned in the report. I can, either give you a link or we can discuss that a little later. I'm sure I can look that up later on if you would like to chat further, for sure. Okay. Types of penalties, another interesting finding from the report. This slide shows the types of penalties imposed for a total of 132 hearings that the Enforcement Department concluded in 2018. We see that in 65 cases, it was determined that misconduct did occur and penalties were imposed. 65 out of 132 is 50%. So when a hearing, when it actually reaches the stage of hearing, it is half the time that a penalty is imposed, which is again a number that is significant, I would say, and can be avoided if we just take a few steps back and follow some of the items that were mentioned earlier today. Okay, so this is in terms of a little bit of the market statistics that we see out there from the life portion and from the MFTA portion. With this one, I can actually hand over to my colleague Margaret to just show you a few examples of some life claims that we see so that you can see how that looks in concrete and how it looks like on our end when we process those, when they reach us, and how those steps are done. Okay. Thank you.
so I'm going to just skip over some of the slides of how to avoid a claim that we've prepared so I can get into my claim examples, and then we can maybe go back to discuss active steps to avoid a claim, just to avoid some repetition and make sure that we're not taking up too much of your time. So I find, as an outsider who is not a financial advisor but who deals with claims and defending those who are, I always find it interesting. The most interesting claims are those where we really have a situation where we're defending an advisor who we don't think did anything wrong, but unfortunately we're still seeing exposure on that advisor. And it's a really unfortunate situation. No one feels good about it. So I wanted to speak to one of those claims examples just to provide you with that example and hopefully give you some takeaways of how to avoid those situations. So my example involves an advisor working in not too large of a city, close with many of his clients, and has a long-standing relationship with a family. So I'm going to refer to mom and dad, their children, 2 sisters, and their grandchildren. So after years of working with mom and dad, dad passes, and mom starts communicating a little bit more with the advisor about her plans for the future and what her succession plans might look like. And she has some concerns that she raises with the advisor. And one of those is she has segregated funds, and she mentions that she would like it if ultimately her money passed to her grandchildren, who are natural bloodline grandchildren, and not the kind of step-grandchildren of her other daughter. So it's a relationship by marriage, not by bloodline. And our advisor diligently listens to her and discusses options. And, he discusses the option of making those grandchildren, who she'd ultimately like to receive her money, irrevocable beneficiaries to her segregated funds. She says, this is a great idea, but I'm not ready to do that yet. I've seen in my family when people give away their money too early. It's unfortunate because they become reliant, and I'm not yet at that stage in my life where I'm willing to, make any changes to that degree. I'll do it later. No problem. Later comes sometime in 2017, where mom falls in the shower, ends up in the hospital, and our advisor gets a call from daughter number 1, who's also a client, also a good friend, who he knows from the community, and says, Mom is now ready to make this irrevocable beneficiary designation. Can we prepare the forms and get this signed? So this is no surprise to the advisor. He's discussed this with his client, prepares the forms, isn't able to go to the hospital to watch mom sign it because he gets the flu, but relying on daughter number 1, who's also his client, who he knows well, he passes along the forms to her. She says, I have power of attorney, everything's fine. He reminds her to get witnesses, and they proceed. Forms get signed, contracts get changed. Mom eventually passes away. So daughter number 1 and daughter number 2 become the owners of the segregated fund, which has beneficiaries designated as the bloodline grandchildren. Advisor thinks everything is fine, no problem. Daughters continue to give him instructions about and continue to invest in the fund, instructions about the fund. He takes those instructions, he's carrying out their wishes, and then one day receives a lawsuit from daughter number 2, who says, I never knew about this. No one ever told me about this. Mom would, of course, not wanted this to be the case, where only the bloodline grandchildren got money, and I suddenly do not have a full right to the capital in this account. I'm so upset, and I'm blaming the advisor for exercising undue influence. This would have never been mom's wishes, is really the thrust of the argument. So here we have the advisor who's just trying to fulfill the wishes of his client, which he knew what they were, gets dragged into this family dispute, protracted litigation, tempers are high, with allegations of negligent misrepresentation against him, just really kind of nasty stuff being alleged, and he's thinking, I was really just trying to help, I was under the impression the